Hello beautiful bookish friends and family, welcome back to Coffee Over Apples, or welcome if you're new. My name is Steph and this is my reading wrap up for quarter 3 of 2021. So these are all the books, not counting manga because that's going to be a completely separate video. Just an overview of my reading for the past 3 months in the summer transitioning to fall quarter of the year.
It could change the world.
For quarter 3, this was actually one of the quarters that had the least amount of books in it. Does that happen to you where you have certain quarters of the year where you just read more or read less? There were certain factors this year that I think contributed to that, especially being that the summer was my first semester in grad school, so I was away at college for the summer. One of these months was basically a month where I read the least amount of books that I read this entire year, which is totally understandable. But in total, we have 2 DNFs, 16 books to get through, spanning from the months of July to September. Let's start with the 2 DNFs, just because that seems the easiest place to begin. The first one is actually going to be a surprise. Actually, both of them are actually going to be a surprise because I know that so many people love these books. But let's start with Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This was a soft DNF. What I mean by soft DNF is that I will most likely end up picking this book up again in the future. The reason that I DNF'd it was because of the format in which I was reading it. I was reading it as an audiobook. Something that I've come to learn about myself this year is that fantasy books do not work for me on audio. I need a physical book in which I can write notes and draw things and doodle in to help me keep track of the descriptive components of the world build, certain characters, certain creatures, things like that. So the more fantastical a story is, unless it's something that I've already established in my head from reading maybe an earlier physical copy, just doesn't work for me. That'll be explained a little bit more in some of the other books that I read this semester. There was a lot of switching back and forth between audio and physical this quarter. There seemed to be a lot of world build. There was some magic systems happening. I just couldn't process it in my mind, meaning that I'm going to pick this book up again later on as a physical copy, which I most likely will end up getting from my library. Not rating it or anything because I didn't get far into it enough. It's just my brain just couldn't keep up with trying to imagine things as they were happening. Also a soft DNF, Gideon the Ninth. This I started with physically, switched over to audio, went back to physical. This is no fault of this book. Potentially, it might actually end up being a favorite book. We had a book club discussion on it in the month of, I want to say it was it July? Or maybe this was end of June. I don't remember. I had too much going on at the time in school. This was, again, that like end of June way into July and then potentially beginning of August when I was so in this intensive program that I was in that I barely did any reading. This is when I did the most DNFing also. Gideon the Ninth, I ended up DNFing, soft DNFing, because I did not have the brain power at the time to imagine the magic system, the necromancers. You'll see that the next book that I'm going to talk about, which is one of the only books that I finished in that time period, was actually a nonfiction because it didn't take all of the brain cells that I have to imagine this world. I love fantastical stories. Necromancy is one of like my favorite things. You guys know me at this point. Chaos. There were some things in the beginning that I was struggling with as far as the world building was concerned. However, it seems like as things got answered later on, I was just maybe being overwhelmed with the amount of questions that I had and the lack of answers that were being given. So maybe it was just a patience thing, but I will be attempting to give both these DNF'd books a second chance. In July, one of the very few, I only read 2 books in July. One was a novella and then one was this nonfiction. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. I gave this 5 stars. I loved it. I actually, and again, something that I ended up switching over to audiobook so I can listen to it as I was painting and doing homework and those things. I need to reread this physically because I believe that it deserves to be annotated. This was such a strong story that I think is so important because there's so many books out there talking about what is racism, what is colorblindness, and how to confront that, but coming from a person who is a person of color, realizing that later on, as they've gotten older, they've been perpetuating systematic racist ideologies in their life and in their rhetoric and just in their family matters that they weren't aware that they were doing. Was really interesting to see, talking about how it is that someone who is a person of color and gains momentum in society to be able to uplift others, how they can also actually be undermining the work that they're doing and trying to help other people get out of these oppressive systems. There's a lot in here that I think a lot of people need to hear, and it also made me stop and reflect because I believe that we're always growing, and I am definitely not without fault in looking back at different times in my life where I may have been also perpetuating certain stereotypes that I was not conscious of because I'm just so used to being surrounded by this rhetoric and thinking that that is the right thing to do. So this book made me reflect a lot, which is why I really enjoyed it. Now, that being said, if you're looking to use this as a guidebook on how to be an anti-racist, just know that that is the last section of the book. I've heard complaints about this online of people saying that it's not really a how-to guide, even though it's kind of in the title that this might be an how-to guide. But that to me does not undermine the significance of this author starting off with telling their stories of their upbringing and how they came to understand that they were an established part of this system that we are trying to subvert. So that being said, I gave it 5 stars, and this will definitely be getting a reread maybe next year because it deserves to be annotated. Binti, the only other book that I read in July because it was for the Sci-Fi Book Club. Wait, was this July? Yeah, this was July. It was for the Interstellar Sci-Fi Book Club, which I read with a bunch of friends of mine. I will be linking that down in the description below in case you want to join us. But I ended up giving Binti, I want to say 3 stars. It was fun. This world has so much potential, and it's a novella, which is the only reason that I got through this in July, thank goodness. The systems in here were so interesting. The aliens were wildly fantastic. Binti themselves is so empowering. I really love Binti as a person, but I had a lot of questions in here that may just be this is the first book in a trilogy and I need to be patient because I'm working on book 2, and I'm currently in the headspace that I think I'm going to end up finishing this entire trilogy, not just because it's short, because it has a lot of potential to talk about different societies and how they progressed in the future, the conservation of different heritages and traditions of indigenous peoples. But what I'm struggling with the series so far, and again I say this because I haven't finished book 2, is that there's certain decisions that Binti's making that just aren't sitting right with me, or the wrap up at the end of this, something about that just didn't make sense. That I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a big decision at the end that in a perfect world would be the perfect answer to solve all wars. But it's just not logical to me, and I'm struggling with that. However, this made me research the Himba people. It made me research their customs. It said, I want to say about 300 years in the future from now or something like that. The importance of the red clay, the ochize, I think I'm saying that correctly, in their culture, in Binti's life, in understanding what it means for her to be a basically first generation person who's leaving her people for a reason that goes completely against their customs. This is a story that needs to be told more often, and that I think a lot of people will really enjoy. So if you haven't read Binti, I highly suggest that you pick it up. I'd say overall this is really a 4-star book, but because I was nitpicking it for the purpose of deconstructing it for the book club, I ended up giving it a 3-star, hoping that the next couple books actually I enjoy a lot more. Okay, I read my first Taliah Hibbert, Damaged Goods by Taliah Hibbert. Thank you, Natalie, my friend over at Pastel Writer, for making me read this book. Everyone loves Taliah Hibbert, and now I see why. Taliah Hibbert writes romance and erotica really, really well. You guys know that this is not a genre that I'm usually pulled into. Probably more erotica than romance, just because I feel like there's more tropes being used in ways that I enjoy more, such as the miscommunication trope, which I cannot stand in erotica. It just seems to be something that, like, we're not gonna waste our time with this miscommunication trope. This is what we want. This is what we're gonna do. Let's go do it. Whereas romance, you have to go through these motions and there's a whole formulaic aspect to it. But Taliah Hibbert did this book so well. It's following some side characters from a series. I don't know if this is book 1.5 or 2.5 or 2. It's not middle of a series, but it's one of those novella series in which each book is following a different side of characters, and they have some history, but you don't need to have read the previous books in the series in order to really enjoy it. I enjoyed this book so much. I think I gave it 4 stars. It's following these 2 characters who were side characters, I believe, in the first book. One of them is pregnant. The other one is this guy. I think he owns a diner or an Italian restaurant or something like that. But she is in an abusive relationship with her husband. She's trying to get out of the relationship. He comes. He's an old friend. Things happen. We go from there. It was very sweet. It was a nice, simple, I want something that is going to have a clean redemption at the end. Cold cut romance. We get what we came here to do, and everyone ends up happy at the end. Happy ever after. Great. I loved it. It did exactly what I needed it to do at the time, which was a palate cleanser. What else did I read in August? Long Way Down, another novella by Jason Reynolds. 5 stars. 5 stars. Amazing. Fantastic. This book was so good. Future me, go ahead and insert a clip here of when I finished this book on live stream, please.
Steph, why are you having a crisis?
Oh no! Do we need to pause? Oh no! I'm having. Oh, what do you need? Oh, let me pause my audiobook. Oh, I'm sorry, everybody, pause. I can't hold it. My face. Listen. What's going on?
Finished A Long Way Down.
Oh, you finished it? Okay. Oh Lord.
It was so good. I freaked out. This book deserves every award that it was given. It is so hard-hitting. It made me want to cry. I really had to use everything in my power to not cry on the live stream because this book was so good. It really, really depicted well what happens when you are a young child, teenage person of color growing up in a neighborhood which violence is just a normal way of life, kind of going back to what was being discussed in How to Be an Anti-Racist, just normal parts of society that shouldn't be normal. The mother who is dealing with the loss of her child, but we're following the younger brother who is dealing with the loss of his older brother due to gang violence and gun violence, thinks they know who committed the crime, and is now in an elevator in which every floor they go down, something happens that makes them confront these perpetuated societal normalcies surrounding gun violence. And it's just not okay. I'm not okay. This book was so good. I heard my friend Jeff over at Dread and Reddit said that there is a graphic novel for this. I need it. I need it. I would reread this book in a heartbeat. Even though I was able to hold back the tears, thinking about it makes me tear up. It's just so strong. And that end line, that last line of the book is such a cliffhanger. But a good cliffhanger, because you just hope that things turn out well. Stop what you're doing, pause this video, go read that book, and let me know if you read it and you loved it as much as I did. More books that I read in August, because in August I was finally home from school and was able to catch up on all the reading that I wanted to do. A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. I really enjoyed this. I ended up giving this 4 stars. As you can see, I was back into my annotating mood. This was such a good story about... There is a theme in all the books that I've been reading this summer and in quarter 3, which is understanding systematic racism, whether that be in the past, in the present, or in the future, because we're following a main character who is a ambassador from a colonized, are they aliens? Maybe not aliens. Different group of humans that are living on space stations, and is going to the mainland, the world in which they believe that they want to be there and actually glorify these people, who they later realize that these colonizers did not have their best intention in mind. After learning through a murder mystery and meeting other representatives of these people that look down upon them and these political dynamics, this is a very political book. There's a sapphic romance in here. It's just wow. Wow. I have a feeling that the second book might have more action in it. That might be one of the weak points in this book, is that while there was action, it's not the kind of action that you're expecting from a big battle fight scenes, right? We've got like swords and maybe lasers and those kinds of things. It's subtle action that's more shocking, and the relationships that built up to specific moments about political upheaval. These characters are so sweet and wholesome in the fact that they are becoming conscious of the prejudices that they had, or becoming conscious of being blind to the prejudices that they were experiencing because of the idealizations that they carried with them. It was amazing. I cannot wait to pick up book 2. I cannot wait. I'm hoping to pick it up very soon for a potential buddy read if I can get my hands on a copy, because there's not another paperback version of book 2. The paperback version of book 2 doesn't come out until 2022, and I need another copy. It's just so good. Let's talk about Mistborn. Here's the thing with Mistborn Era 2. I got them all physical. As you can see, there's one that doesn't match. I prefer the hardback to these mass market paperbacks because they're so tiny. Choices that I prefer are always bigger versions, whether it be hardback or preferably large print paperback, to the tiny mass market paperbacks because they're just easier to read when they're larger. But I ended up switching over to this on audiobook as I was trying to rush and finish it for the COSMERE CRABALONG conversation that was happening in the end of August, meaning that I read this too fast. I did not rate these books because I was plowing through it on audio on 2x speed for a week and a half just to get enough information of the COSMERE connections in order to be part of the discussion, but really it went over my head. I like Westerns. Westerns are so much fun. Westerns are comfort movies to me. But even though this was in a place in which it could have been a potential 5-star read because it's in a world that I love Mistborn Era 1, I'm familiar with the magic system, meaning that even though I read it on audio and it is fantasy, because I read the first Mistborn Era 1 physically, I was already familiar with the magic system, and so it took less brain power to imagine things as I already had an established visual in my mind, right? But because I went through them so fast, this entire series is a blur. I remember bits and pieces. I remember Hoyd. I remember strange things happening at the end, some COSMERE connections, sarcasm. There was a lot of funny moments, but again, it was like a train going by really way too fast, and I couldn't keep up with it because that's my fault for not putting this earlier in the month to be able to really sit down and enjoy it. What's gonna end up happening is I'm just gonna end up rereading these later on. It could also be a case of I didn't just finish Mistborn Era 1. I read it earlier in the year. But you know when you have a book that's so close to your heart, you're not ready to move on in the series, you just need months of processing and digestion to get to the next sequel? That was me. I could have done with about 2 or 3 more months of processing Era 1 before going to Era 2, but oh well. The last book that I read in August was A Secret History, which is also part of the Mistborn series, but I read this on audio. I got the graphic audio for it. Fantastic graphic audio, by the way. I understand why people love them because the sound effects are amazing. However, it was directly related to Era 1. I'm not going to talk about this at all, basically, because if you haven't read it, it's going to spoil a lot of things. It answers a lot of COSMERE questions. It brings in a ton of COSMERE connections, but it also gives you way more questions. I love it because of the focus on main protagonists throughout the COSMERE, but it did have one of my least favorite tropes of all time, and I can't say what that is because it's going to be a direct spoiler. Just know that if you know me, you know what my least favorite tropes are. That's the only reason why. Even though I love this book, I'm only giving it 4 stars because I just can't get over that trope that I just can't stand. And in September, started out the month really strong with Summer Suns by Lee Mandelo, which I got as a arc from Tor, and I'm eternally grateful for because I loved it. I loved it so much. I gave it 4.5 stars. I did an entire video review on this, so I won't go into depth about that here. It's a 25-minute video. There's a huge non-spoiler section and then a spoiler section, so I'll just leave the card somewhere so that you can go and watch that independent review of this. But if you are looking for a dark academia queer story to read for the spooky season, this is a new release. Check it out. It just came out at the end of September. I think everyone's gonna love it. It's new adult. It's definitely, this is one of those books that I think justifies why we need a new adult section in the bookstore, because it's definitely not YA, but the characters are still in their very early 20s. I want to say like around 21 to 23, and making very specific decisions that as an older reader, you might look at it and say, why are we doing this? But it fits for their age range. So all I will say about this is I really enjoyed it. The spookiness increased the farther in the book we got. In the beginning, it was very much about the relationships, about the main character who is dealing with the death of one of his lifelong best friends because they committed suicide, and then goes to college for a graduate program and is learning more about what was happening around their friend, the people that they were hanging out with during their last days, to kind of find out what led them to make that decision, but also dealing with ghosts and like ghost hunting kind of stuff. Just check it out. I hope you love it. Where I Left Her by Amber Garza is another book that I did an entire book review on, so again I will link that up above for you to check that out. But I got this as an arc for a blog tour through Harlequin HarperCollins Publishing as one of their blogger friends. thank you so much for sending this to me as an ARC. It was so much fun to read. I ended up giving it a 3 star as one of those middle of the road thrillers that I think is going to work more for some people and just didn't work as well for me, even though I had a fun time reading it. So I will say, if you're just looking for a want to have a fun time thriller for shock value, this is probably one that you're going to enjoy. Really briefly, we're following a mom who drops her daughter off for a sleepover, doesn't go to say hi to the parents because it's having a really rocky relationship with their daughter. Their daughter's an older teenager, I want to say like around 17, something like that. Decides to just let her go sleep over at her friend's house, comes back the next day to pick up her daughter, and guess what? There's no children there. What does she do? Find out. Towards the end of September, actually, okay, I read this in the last few days of September because I saw it, couldn't say no, was a buddy read, novella, horror, yes. It is a Japanese folklore novella gore story, Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. I got this as an ARC through NetGalley. I read it with my friend Natalie over at Pastel Writer. This was a highly anticipated book for me. Ended up giving it 2 stars. Just missed the mark. If you are a character-driven reader, then you might like this more than I did. However, even though I am a plot-driven reader, I'm also very much into atmosphere setting. It's taking place, I want to say this should count as a gothic horror because it's taking place in this old Japanese mansion. We have a group of friends who one of them is getting married and has always wanted to go to have their wedding in a spooky setting, which is fine. People love themed weddings, right? So this group of friends who has a very complicated dynamic that I couldn't relate to because I don't understand why people go on vacations with people that they don't like. That just doesn't click. Could not relate to these characters and their decisions. I didn't really care about their relationships. It was convoluted, just not my jam. But I wanted more atmosphere from this book. If you're looking for a gothic horror that gives you much more atmosphere building, tell me about the dust on the floor. Tell me about the sunlight, how it streamed through the window and created shadows. Tell me about the creaking of the wood. Tell me about those things more so than who was doing what, who was sleeping with who. I just didn't care about that. When we finally got down to the horror aspect, to me, it was subpar. To me, it seemed like there were characters who were conscious of what was happening, but were making decisions that, again, just didn't seem logical. Like, there's gore happening and there's a way to get out, but we're not taking it. What I did appreciate about this was the Japanese folklore not being overly explained. I don't think it's necessary that because the audience may not be familiar with cultural stories that are outside the realm of the Disney-inspired tales that we're all used to and we have background information on, it's okay. I don't need to be fully explained what these different things are, like a kitsune and all these different things that I may or may not be familiar with. However, I think there's still, going back to the atmospheric perspective, a certain level of descriptiveness that would have aided this more because I am a visual reader. So you don't got to tell me the background of what, again, using just the kitsune as an example, you don't need to give me the entire history of what that folklore is. Give me a description. Is it crouching in the corner? Is the fur ruffled? Does it have no fur? Are the eyes glowing? Where are these creatures in comparison to the characters in this setting? And the resolution at the end, I found it kind of whack. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Someone else may love this. I saw people online really did enjoy it and I'm really happy for them. So I would still say definitely go and check this out if you're looking for a very short, gory, adult Japanese folklore. And then lastly, I don't know where I put my copy of this, but that's okay, because I don't care. If you love Dune, I love you, but Dune did not love me because I did not love it. It was a 1-star book. I have an entire rant review that I made for this, and I don't know if that video is gonna go up before this one or after this one, but I read it in September for the Interstellar Book Club. While everyone else thought it was a decent time, I personally suffered. That's okay. I will not go into the reasons why here. It just didn't work for me. I completely understand why. This is a pillar of science fiction because of what it did at the time. There was nothing like it. The ideas in this book are phenomenal, and I see the direct references to future very famous science fiction stories. However, the execution here, the representation of certain characters, of women, of certain choices that were made, cultural appropriation that I just personally didn't feel comfortable with. There's a whole 40-minute video coming out, if it's not out already, explaining that. If it's already out, I'll leave the tag up there. If it's not, keep your eyes peeled for when that drops on my channel pretty soon. So those are the quarter 3 books. I say books because I also read quite a few manga. In total, I've read about 30 or more, I want to say between 30 and 40 titles in quarter 3. However, I do read a lot of manga as one of the hosts for the Host Club, which is the manga book club that I run. So I will make an entire separate video about all the manga that I read, because if not, then this video would be over an hour long. That being said, these are all the books that I read in quarter 3. If you enjoyed any of these, please definitely let me know if you think any of these series that I'm reading I should continue on with, or if you think that I should give the audiobooks another try, or if you have any advice as to how I can make fantasy audiobooks work for me better. I'm all ears. Definitely drop your suggestions in the comment box down below. But that is it for now. I post videos every week. See you later. Bye!
What's it making, Mr. Wonka? Mr. Wonka worked the factory.
In your wildest dreams, you put out the legend.